Top of the feed. I trust and hope all is well with you and yours. Welcome to an absolutely gorgeous day, adding value to the volume one episode at a time. This is Academ-ish, and I'm your host, Jeff Halliday. I'm an associate professor of communication studies at Longwood University. And it's important to note that while I'm really excited to get this initiative underway, it is separate from my teaching and my contributions to Longwood. This podcast is all about edutainment. Through compelling interviews with guests, I want us to really learn alongside one another. My hope is that in this space, we will, over time, create a community together. And really, I want to emphasize something pretty important to me is engagement without enragement. I think we can create that space and again, add value to the volume in the process. I encourage you to kind of like, follow, subscribe, and yes, review the podcast everywhere you can find us online. Yep, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc. You can also find us online at academishpod.com. Please consider all of those spaces a way to kind of continue the conversation away from the podcast. And also it brings more voices to the conversation. So I encourage you to share, like, follow, subscribe, and know from my heart, I want to say thank you. Today's episode is actually the first episode we've ever had, and it's going to be a part of a series I'm starting called Farmville Famous, which I'm really, really excited about. I got to talk to the mayor of Farmville, Brian Vincent, whose story is really, really compelling, especially for those of you who might not be familiar with everything that happens in the thriving metropolis of Farm Vegas. I know that you'll love Brian's story. And in today's episode, it's one of two parts because we talked for a long time, so I had to break it up, which is a good thing. We wanted to talk about what brought Brian to Farmville, his position with the Appomattox River Company, what's happening there, which is actually pretty exciting. Some breaking news you can learn about in here. Also, he decided to join the Farmville Town Council and run for office in 2017, 2018, and eventually to run for mayor of Farmville. I want to talk to him about that process. And also, he recently announced that he's joining the Forward Party, a political party you might not know a lot about, and he's excited to share it with you. We get to learn together, so let's start the conversation. As I was getting the Farmville Famous episode concept together, as I told you, sir, everyone said, you better talk to the mayor. And I said, I will start with the mayor. I promised you that. Brian Vincent, the general manager of the Appomattox River Company, and yes, the mayor of Farm Vegas, otherwise known as Farmville, Virginia. Brian, I really appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, buddy. So lots of things I do want to talk about. Obviously, the Appomattox River Company, a major part of your life. I hate when people just go right to your role as mayor or your time on the town council and forget about this other life that you have. So
Yeah, yeah. The
about your
full
time with
time,
the Appomattox River Company. Yeah.
yeah. Academ-ish Recovery, great family business. My wife's father started in 1977. I've been there since 2012, and have been running it since 2018. And he and I are in breaking news. He and I are in negotiation to maybe hand over the reins fully.
Wow. That's a
So
big deal.
we'll see how that goes. Yeah, try to keep the family business rolling.
Yeah, well, that is breaking news, and I do appreciate you sharing it with us. And congrats to you, and obviously to Mr. Taylor too. I mean, like to 1977, right? I mean,
Dude,
that's
yeah, man, he built a really cool thing, and it's been going a long time, and that was the main thing. Like when we first started talking about it, was like nothing that happens like from this moment forward will ever diminish like what you built here. Like it has
right.
been such a great thing, and yeah, I'm proud to be a part of it and to try and keep it going.
So you go into that like advanced leadership role you said in 2018, right? Just
Right.
it just so happens you're just not busy enough with, kids and all
Yeah,
that. That's when you ran for town council, right? In 2018.
exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah. Why not take on a little bit more?
and I see you post about this all the time, which I do appreciate. I know you get some not so fun feedback about that, but you put yourself out there in a way that most people cannot and will not and could not do as well as you do. But talk a little bit about what that decision was all about. Clearly, without sounding too religious, you felt called to it in some way, shape, or form, right? You felt like there was an opportunity there, like you said, at a totally not busy time in your life in 2018.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
run that through, and then November of 2022, you run for mayor. So walk us
That's
through
right.
your choice to go into the political realm, if you will.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't something that I'd always had in my mind to do. But at one point, I think it was in West Virginia, where Harriet and I, my wife, met. I got introduced to a political action committee there that was a nonpartisan political action committee, and we got involved in some of the mountaintop removal, underground
Yeah.
mine, and outdoor recreation conversation. And I really enjoyed being in rooms where we were trying to bring people together and talk about contentious issues and try and find common ground. That was really my first foray. But then years later, we moved to Farmville, and at some point, I just remember in the tumultuousness of national politics, I
Yeah.
remember my
Certainly
wife.
then.
Yeah, I remember my wife saying something about being worried about the future that was being built for our children, and that was really just that sentence was like a real catalyst for me because it was like, okay, uh, I felt a responsibility, one, to my kids. I wanted to provide a model of leadership that they could see and emulate because I didn't feel like there was enough of the model I wanted to see in the world. And so in that classic sense of if you don't see it, go be it. And so that's kind of was the choice I made. And that concentric circles, of course, went out to the larger community and the next generations, which was, we're in a college town, two college town.
Yeah.
Uh,
Don't you can't
yeah,
you have to say
can't,
it. The
can't leave
two
that out.
college town. America's old.
Being able to project a form of leadership for those next generations that I hope would be a good model. And so walking into it with my eyes wide open and realizing that at some point in public service, it seems like there's a switch that happens. And I was always curious about when it happened. Like when did you perceive that people go into public service for the public good, but at some point it seems to like
Yeah.
almost twist a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And too
That's a
many,
fair thing. Yeah.
yeah, too many people putting stuff in your pocket. Who knows what it is? But
Right.
I don't know. I was always curious about it, and so that those sort of things, wanting to do good, wanting to help model a form of leadership for my kids and the next generations, and as everybody knows who knows my story, I come from a family of service on my side of the family. So my father served, went to West Point Army Academy, was killed active duty when I was 14. And so that really has informed what I do as well, because he was one of the, was still to this day, I always joke, you tend to lionize people when they're gone, right? It's just a habit that we have. Uh, but I always felt like he really earned it. Um, and so I carry that in my service as well, like the belief that we can all serve. And yeah, just trying to do
I,
my part.
I appreciate that, and it is a powerful story that you shared publicly online, and every time you do, I mean, it pulls on all the heartstrings in all the authentically proper ways, and I do
Right.
appreciate it. It is always powerful. We recently just had Veterans Day. You posted on Veterans Day, and I know for me, as a son of a Vietnam veteran in the Army, I know how close that connection of service can be. Mine ended up largely going through scouting, right? That's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
that's
yeah.
where I leaned into
Absolutely.
it,
Yeah.
and I love being an educator for that purpose too. I will ask it really quickly. I think to your point, we have a maybe not a societal, that sounds too big picture, but we've stopped valuing public service, and certainly in the way that I think we did generations back. I think we do need examples like you said. I guess I want to know how you feel that that's worked for you. Do you feel, I know you've talked about this with your own family, but do you feel that young people are maybe an increased interest in public service? We see different forms of engagement from young people now in politics in a way that maybe we didn't see a few years ago. So I'll say I have hope, but I do think we need to honor public service more.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And we talk about this all the time. I go to conferences for elected officials across
Yeah.
Virginia and elected officials across the country, and I'll be in one soon. And it's a topic of conversation that comes up often. is the erosion of trust in public officials, the erosion of trust in government,
And
and those,
media.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, right, oh yeah, and some of it is like I always talk about on our, at least on our level, is inconsistencies, right? Where if you create inconsistencies, people start to feel erosion of trust, and you can really see that, in my estimation, on the power dynamics of how partisan politics have gotten,
Hmm.
to where it's it's all acquisition of power, and in that pursuit, there's often hypocritical pointing and blaming,
Sure.
when both sides can be guilty of certain things. And so, you would hope that there's enough of us, and I know quite a few folks who are out there, who are trying to project that authentic form of leadership and opening the door for the next generation. I know coming and speaking to students at Longwood, that's always my thing, is there's always a seat at the table for you.
Yeah.
You just have to claim it. And too often, I recognize this in speaking to them as a youth when I was in my 20s. I didn't think there was a seat at the table for me, or that I even wanted to be involved.
Right.
It was like, what, the classic, what does my voice really, yeah, is it even, is there even space for it? And
Right.
will they even listen? And the truth is, yes. I'm in an elected office now. And when enough kids come up to me, young adults come up to me, like after the keynote at symposium, and
Mhm.
say, we want a more pedestrian and bike friendly town here.
Yeah.
That resonates when a bunch of them come up and talk to me about it. And
Right.
and there's power in that. And so yeah, participation is big. And I think what I think the next generation see, and what's been hard for the generations that preceded us, like the boomers, and then maybe even X's a little bit, although we've always been kind of jaded as X's,
True.
is the amount of politicians who now come into public service, and it's almost like as an influencer,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
just seeking to, like,
They hit that point you were talking about pretty
yeah,
quick, pretty quick.
yeah, right, yeah, instantly they recognize, like, okay, I can build a brand inside this silo
Yep.
and generate donations and generate interest from corporations and all this stuff, and it becomes this self-replicating thing, and
Yeah,
then
it's
you just keep,
cyclical. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and so that, I think, has created some of that mistrust in politics as well, in public office. But yeah, to your point, there are a lot of good people in public service trying to build that belief back into public service. So I
I
have
think
faith.
I have faith too,
Yeah.
and it's hard to have hope and faith sometimes. But yet we press on. To your point earlier, I think once, especially when you're younger and you start getting interested and you start participating and you start working towards advocacy, there's a part of you that thinks, well, it'll happen just like that. And then you get involved, and obviously you have I don't have the experience. You have the experience in governance where that is a machine that is a lot more challenging to navigate. And I think obviously to your
Yeah.
point about people's association with trust, but also just maybe a lack of familiarity with that process. They expect things very quickly. They're like, I want a pedestrian, healthy area, and you can make that happen by like December, right?
Right.
When I get back for the spring semester, right, it'll all be done.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that had to have been a frustration for you too. Not, I know that you knew that going into council, and then obviously running for mayor. But there's so much about that process that I think is a lot harder for people to understand unless they've been a civil servant, unless they've been a public servant.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge, and I think you do well in creating maybe a larger sense of how these things are a little bit more complicated than we want them to be. But can you
Right.
talk about what that experience has been like for you in what it's been 7 years, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there. It's like, and maybe it's an erosion of like civics being taught in high school
I think
as
a lot of our friends
robustly.
who are educators would agree. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so there's just not these touch points where people know how it works. And even elected officials who will, you'll get elected officials who come into it via like an activist arm, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they got really active in advocating for one specific issue, and then they've gotten into local or political office, and then they realize, Scrooge, things move slow,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's a feature, not a bug. You know,
Right.
it's like it's designed that way, and the reason is, as human beings, we are highly emotional and reactive. If we just ping off of everything that gets thrown off us at us, we don't go anywhere meaningful. And
Right.
so you need to have some of those checks in place so that things do move slowly, so that you make sure you're making the right choice. And so, yeah, it can be tough because, to your point, you'll have these passions and you'll want to drive on them, but you have to realize, and my I learned early on as a council member, it was like everything is majority rule.
Yeah.
And so I have to learn like the ticks and the motivations of my other
Yep.
council members.
Yep.
I got to figure out what they care about, what their constituents care about, what I care about, and then try to drive for 4 votes on
Yeah.
things that I think are important. And if you don't get them, then you're in the minority, and there's no point in like raising crazy hell, even though we see that on a national level,
All the
because
time.
it doesn't serve the community in the right way. And so, yeah, it can be frustrating, but at the same time, when you really work at something like we've worked for a great many years on this joint 911 crisis center
Yes.
with
Just got
the
announced
county,
recently. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and Longwood and Hampton Sydney, and that's a great development, right? It's going to expedite response times. It's going to be better for our citizens, for the whole region, having those public safety response times shortened. And then next year we'll have a new radio system that works for everybody. And so those things will continue to like, and they're not like real splashy, sexy things that people are like, that's awesome.
Right.
But they create real meaningful
Right.
impact in your community at
One
moments
day,
of crisis.
one day it'll be you calling an
Right.
emergency, and the response rate will be, or there'll be whole parts of the community that weren't served that now are.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that took a long time. It took meetings, took a lot of work, and we're finally getting there. And so that's cool.
Yeah.
So it is nice and rewarding when that sort of thing happens. We worked really hard for longer than my term on as mayor, but over the last 3 years of my mayoral term, we've really pushed hard towards a certain financial footing because we knew we wanted to establish ourselves as a reputable, financially responsible
Yeah.
location.
Rating. Yeah.
Yeah, and we finally went out and got that credit rating. And for the first time ever, the town of Farmville has a AA credit rating, and that's a equivalent to towns like or cities like Danville and places like Dumfries that are much bigger, or Northern Virginia than us. And so it's a cool thing.
Yep.
And that took a lot of work, and so it's rewarding when it comes home and you're like, all right, we got it done.
Yes, people always want to ask the questions about, what businesses are coming here, what jobs are coming here, housing, and you're like, well, there's all these data points that
Yeah,
they're looking for to see if this is a viable investment, right?
that's right.
So I think that that's fair, and it takes time to do it. And I know you're in the streets enough to understand where people's frustrations come from
Oh
because
yeah.
we're all out here living every day. But it's nice to know that we're making tangible efforts. Farmville, I've been here for 18 years, and it's grown in lots of ways in that time. That's been really exciting. One thing I told you I want to talk about for sure is you made this announcement in August that I thought was really interesting, and I know you made some clarifying comments online, so I want to make sure I get it right too. While you remain independent politically, you aligned yourself with the Forward Party, which is a party that, as I told you, Brian, I really wasn't all that familiar with. Obviously, you've talked about it in different podcasts. I encourage people to learn more about the Forward Party, just in general. I do think, to your point about partisan politics, we have a system that might not be broken, but man, it is it's a struggle. It's really struggling. I want to ask you kind of two things about it. What your initial choices were for why selecting the Forward Party, and then I do want to look at the most recent November election results. We kind of get your sense on what do those mean, incrementally even moving forward for the party in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But first,
Yeah.
why the Forward Party? I know there's options out there, but why
Yeah.
for you specifically, Brian?
Yeah. So as a local elected official, we generally run as independents to begin with.
Right.
I am, yeah. And then even when you do that, everybody kind of knows that certain people fall in certain categories.
Or they'll
Um,
assume you were wearing a flannel shirt and a hunting cap. I know everything there is to know about
you
you.
know, that's right. You know everything about me. I'm getting in the mindset. Rifle season starts this Saturday.
I was going to say
I'm getting
Saturday.
excited.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great example, right? Like I don't fit neatly in boxes, right? Obviously, I have some rural, as my wife says, some rural redneck tendencies, and
I'm just a long-haired hippie professor, so it's whatever. It's fine.
right.
It's fine.
And so yeah, I've long identified as an independent minded person. I tried to dabble in different party politics and never felt fully home in any of them. When I was in North Carolina, back in like the 2008, 2007 time range, you can register in North Carolina as an independent, and I did so.
Yeah.
Here in Virginia, we have open primaries, so you can vote wherever you want.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it was one of those things in public office, particularly if you show some version of aptitude for it and a support network, people will always try and encourage you to go further.
Right.
And so I've had lots of folks over the years who, I served 8 years on the Department of Wildlife Resources Board, which is a board that often is comprised of some heavy hitters who have come through politics. And folks have always encouraged me to run for a higher office. And it was always like, well, yeah, but there's not a network or a foundation base by which I could do it, because I would have to go to a party.
You wanted to stay independent, right? I don't want to pick one of these routes. Yeah.
And so it was tough. And then the Forward Party kind of popped up on my radar because I was always looking around for an independent potential where you could really try and build that resource network.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I came across it and looked up their stuff. And it was like, if you wanted to be affiliated, you had to sign a pledge. And, oftentimes when you're talking about political parties, there's kind of like these litmus tests that say you have to agree with these policies. And I never really liked that because I do skew a little bit different. Sure. And so their pledge was basically rule of law, follow the Constitution, election reform. So like I said, open primaries, or even looking at ranked choice voting as a real strong option for our democracy. And those are all just ways to try and break apart some of that partisan gridlock. And then there was using data to make decisions instead of emotions. Shocking.
Right.
And aversion to partisan gerrymandering, so not nonpartisan redistricting. And then, just trying to be decent human being when it comes to campaigning and government.
I read about it and I thought of Bill and Ted, right?
Yeah.
Be excellent to each other.
Excellent.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Which is fine. That's a fine philosophy. It's fine.
Right. But people, it's funny you put that out there, and people will get, like, they want to nail you down.
Right. They want to make it easy.
On all, like, they want you to be basically on one side or the other. And it's like, look, there are going to be people in this party who see things differently on issues. There are going to be people who don't agree with me about guns that'll be in this party. And that's fine. I'm not going to be mad at them. I'm not going to think they're evil. I'm not going to, I just want to have conversations about these things, like real pragmatic, solution-focused conversations about how we fix some of these things that are going on.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like a good avenue for that. And I've met a lot of cool people and had a good reception from most folks.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of people they want to just pick sides and then nitpick, if you will. And I've seen you respond to some of them online, and I do appreciate the candor by which you do.
Yeah,
To your point, I'll just quickly say that I think if we've learned anything in I mean, since around the time you joined up into the political fray, if you will, that 2018, 2017 timeframe, we're a lot more complicated as a voter base. We're a lot more
right.
complex as a citizenry than we think. There's a lot more gray,
Yeah,
I do think, to your point, I think we're heading in a direction where you can read political scientists are talking about whether or not we're actually a populist nation now and all these other things. And I know you read a lot about philosophy as well, but I definitely think that people don't want to be in one bin or the other. They want to feel that they can come to a middle ground on decisions that impact them, and again, their own philosophies and beliefs as well. I look at the state, I looked at the November election results, and I'll readily admit, just Googled it and went through it. But to your point, outside of the hyper local races, I think there were 10 total candidates that ran as independents, and that includes two from the Forward Party. And I believe in both of those races, they got about 2% of the vote, right? So it's a brand new party just try to build some momentum in the Commonwealth. I did read that the Forward Party at the national level, endorsed lots of different candidates, some running as Forward Party candidates, some of them running outside of it, but essentially had alignments with the Forward Party. Where do you see, that Forward Party growing maybe within the state? Let's start with Virginia, right? So, okay, we chipped away 2% there. You just kind of hoping to kind of build that over time, knowing it's going to take a while.
yeah. So the party itself is only about 2 years old, so it's
Yeah,
pretty new. And so yeah, it's building out that first. And what's unique in America is each state kind of has their different requirements to get
right.
ballot access and that sort of thing. And so, what the Forward Party is trying to do is systematically start to check off a lot of those boxes.
Hmm.
It's probably going to take till 2028
Yeah.
to accomplish a good deal of that. But that's why, like, you got to have a certain amount of candidates run for state office, a certain amount of candidates run for national office, and that those designations differ depending on what state you're in. And so, yeah, we'll continue to like chip away at those requirements and parameters and qualify for ballot access and qualify as a recognized party so that you can continue to build out that infrastructure and become a place that can help candidates run. So you'll see just continual push in those directions. I remember my first experience with this in Virginia was the 2017, I guess, campaign. Was it 2017? Maybe campaign McAuliffe versus Cuccinelli
Oh,
here for
okay.
governor in
Yeah,
Virginia,
yeah, yeah.
and I campaigned for this libertarian candidate named Robert Sarvis. And to
Oh,
this
yeah.
day, it's
I
the
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, it's the only time I've ever campaigned. I think for another candidate, and I actually hosted and organized on Main Street a little rally for Sarvis, and it was only because I wanted a third party to
Right.
get 10% of the vote and be recognized, and that
Right.
was it. And so I ended up being, I always tell this story, I ended up getting appointed to the Department of Wildlife Resources board by McAuliffe after having campaigned against him. But that was through some great connections that I had, and they recognized that I was
That you
uh,
cared. That you
yeah,
cared.
yeah, that
Yeah.
it wasn't like some dismissive of their candidate, but rather just what I was angling for.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, you got to continue to build out that network, build out a foundation so that you can check all the boxes and ultimately start to run and fund campaigns at a bigger level.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah, I did a few town halls this campaign cycle where I traveled up to Northern Virginia and I traveled to Richmond and did some town halls with some of the other candidates. And yeah, I don't know why they thought I was good, worth bringing along, but they did, and I had a good time.
well, I think you're worth it, but also how many people are throwing themselves out there in that space? I mean,
Right.
that to me is part of it too. That's part of the kind of a larger issue, and I don't think it's just an American issue, right? But it's a lot harder to be in that space. You sacrifice, potentially sacrifice a lot. So I think oftentimes we can become, especially in the scroll and in the feed, we can become very cynical, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, we're people that are trying to hopefully elicit positive change, right? To your
Yeah.
point, we're not always going to agree what positive looks like, but and I'm not saying they only picked you out because you were willing to go. I just don't think there's a lot of people that are going to be willing to put themselves in that space. I think that's harder.
Well, and that's, yeah, to your point, it always takes courage to put yourself out there for public judgment. But it takes we need a lot more people who are like, all right, I see and recognize something isn't working, and then being willing to jump in and try and do something about it instead
Yeah.
of just complaining.
I want to learn.
Yeah.
I want to learn. I want to try.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, just this morning I was reading, some of the stoicism stuff I do, and it was like,
Yeah.
don't be caught.
I read the Witcher novels, by the way. So fine. Good.
Right.
Way to make me look bad, Brian. Thanks a lot.
But it was like, don't be caught complaining about public life, even to yourself.
Wow.
And I have to remember that sometimes, because even as much as I do love it and appreciate it and dive into it, there are times where I get frustrated and
Yeah.
will gripe, and it's like, all right, well, what ultimately does that do? It doesn't do anything. Let me dive back in and try and find some solutions.
Part two of my conversation with the mayor is going to go into some really important and troubling local news here in our Farmville community. The Central Southside Community Hospital recently announced that they are going to be ending all labor and delivery service as of December 19th and closing their entire women's health care unit. Essentially, pretty devastating news for not only Farmville and Prince Edward County, but those in our surrounding communities as well. Brian talks about that, the pain that's coming with that, what he's heard so far, and some of his thoughts moving forward. We talk a little bit more about his political experience, some words of advice that he has, some general thoughts about public service. And then finally, I ask him something I will ask every single guest, which is called Joy-ish. I want them to talk about something that's bringing joy and light into their life. And I know you'll appreciate what the good mayor has to say. My thanks again to Brian for joining us. Thank you for following along with this adventure. For the Academ-ish podcast, I'm Jeff Halliday. Again, review, like, follow, subscribe, all the good stuff, and we'll see you next time.